The film opens as Lydia Deetz is filming an episode of her paranormal talk show, Ghost House. In it she interviews two couples who claim they have ghosts in their house, which Lydia can see. During a taping of one of her episodes, she is spooked by what appears to be Beetlejuice sitting among the audience. She starts to have a panic attack, and her manager and lover, Rory, comes to calm her. However, she freaks out and goes to the bathroom to calm herself. There, she meets a lady who turns out to be a ghost with a knife plunged into her head. Lydia takes a pill to calm herself, but Rory finds her in the act and throws the pills she was about to take into a trash can, telling her she doesn't have to rely on drugs to be on the show. Later, he gives them back to her, and he takes one for himself, promising it would be for the last time because she needs to continue the show. Lydia starts to get lots of texts and calls from her stepmother, Delia, who is frantic over terrible news. Lydia abandons the show and goes to meet her stepmother Delia in a theater, where she's clearly devastated by the death of her husband. Delia explains to Lydia that after Charles' trip to watch a unique bird mating, their plane malfunctioned on the return trip, and they crashed into the ocean. Charles managed to survive, but he's chopped in half by a shark. Lydia wants to share the news with her daughter but gets scared because she hasn't been in good terms with her. One of Delia's workers gets angry after an unsuccessful work assignment and leaves the theater. He crosses the road without paying attention and falls into a sewage, meeting his own death. Upon waking up with a swollen face, he sees a woolly walkway with an old man standing there. The old man tells him to pick a number and enter a certain room. Afterwards, the man begins cleaning what seems to be a storage room but gets electrocuted after his floor scrubber malfunctions when it touches a wet floor, and he's sent flying. But somehow, he still manages to survive. A box filled with human parts starts to crawl up together. Each body part gets picked up by the host, who ends up stapling them together. After she's done, she stands firmly and asks the weak old man about the whereabouts of Beetlejuice. However, the old man clearly doesn't have any idea who that is, and she ends up sucking up his soul, leaving only an empty sack of human flesh. At school, Astrid is bullied by her peers, but when she says a few heart-wrenching words to them, they become scared. She gets a call from her mom but ignores it. Lydia and her stepmother are on their way to share the sad news, with Rory driving them. He wants to be part of the family and wishes to establish a good bond with his soon-to-be stepdaughter. After sharing a lame story about how he lost his grandfather 40 years ago, Delia tells them she would handle the talking. Lydia doesn't know how to communicate with her daughter, so she lets her stepmother do the talking. Astrid is still sad over the death of her father and now her grandfather. Her mom, who runs a show where she haunts ghosts, can't even see the ghost of her father and calls her a fraud for it. Meanwhile, somewhere in the underworld, Beetlejuice is working as a manager in a department known as the Afterlife Call Center, alongside other shrunken head guys who appear to be his employees. Everyone is busy handling calls from the dead, who keep complaining about the situations of the living. Beetlejuice gets a mail invitation, where he gets to wait in the reception with other dead people. Wolf Jackson, an actor in real life who is now a ghost detective, confronts Beetlejuice over the appearance of Dolores, the resurrected lady from earlier. Beetlejuice says he knows nothing about the lady in question. In fact, he's never heard such a name when he was alive, even now that he's dead. Decapitated Charles keeps wandering around because he can't find his way, and Dolores also wanders around looking for Beetlejuice. While sucking up any soul she comes across, she picks a white dress and uses her dark magic to paint it black. Beetlejuice is really scared of the emergence of the evil Dolores, and he explains to his shrunken head employees that Dolores is the reason he's working here in the underworld. He then takes us back to when he was alive. Dolores was a beautiful, charming lady whom he met while he was a grave robber, stealing valuable items from dead bodies. Dolores saw him and fell in love with him at first sight. After they got married, Dolores tricked Beetlejuice into ingesting poisoned wine since she was the leader of a soul-sucking cult. But before dying, Beetlejuice chopped her into pieces, and now he knows she is out for revenge. When Beetlejuice learns that Lydia is returning to Winter River, he sees this as his ticket out of the underworld. The Deetz women arrive in town and stay at Lydia's old home on the hill. After the funeral, Rory seizes the opportunity to propose to Lydia in front of everyone, even though she clearly doesn't want to say yes, and Astrid makes no effort to hide her disdain for Rory. Lydia reluctantly agrees to it. Annoyed, Astrid goes for a bike ride around town. She ends up crashing through a fence and hitting a tree, where she finds a boy named Jeremy Fraser, Arthur Conti, in his treehouse. They sit and bond for a minute as Astrid tells Jeremy about how Lydia is her mom. Astrid later goes into the attic of the house, where she finds the Old Town model, as well as a pamphlet for Beetlejuice, a trick to get her to say his name. Lydia finds her and stops her from saying it. However, when Rory finds her, he attempts to incorporate his phony new wave methods to try and help Lydia, so he says Beetlejuice's name 3 times and gets him and Lydia sent into the model, where she is once again face to face with the trickster demon. He also manages to terrify Rory by doing his nightmare face before Lydia sends them back home. Astrid goes to Jeremy's house, where she finds that he owns a handbook for the recently deceased, claiming that he got it at a yard sale in town. They make plans to hang out at his house on Halloween the following night. Hours before the wedding, Astrid has Lydia drive her to Jeremy's house for their hangout. They go upstairs to his room, where Jeremy charms Astrid, and they share a kiss, only to find themselves floating moments later. Jeremy reveals himself as a ghost who died falling out of the treehouse. He tells Astrid that he wants her help in bringing him back to life, with the promise that she can see her father again. Meanwhile, Lydia talks to a real estate agent who is going to sell the house, and the woman mentions that the house Jeremy lived in hasn't been able to be sold because it's a murder house. The agent says that Jeremy murdered his parents 23 years earlier, and he fell from the treehouse to his death before the police could arrest him. Lydia realizes Astrid is in trouble and rushes back to Jeremy's house. Jeremy has Astrid read an incantation from the handbook, which opens a portal to the afterlife. Lydia arrives too late, as Astrid has followed Jeremy through the door. With no other options, a desperate Lydia returns to the house and summons Beetlejuice. He is more than thrilled to have the love of his afterlife bringing him back, but after Lydia tells him she needs his help in saving Astrid, Beetlejuice agrees on the condition that Lydia marry him so he can get away from Dolores. Lydia says yes. Beetlejuice blows open a door to the afterlife and has one of the shrunken head guys, Bob, take his place in case anybody goes looking for him. At the graveyard, Delia is performing some kind of ritual to honor Charles using 2 asps that she was told were defanged. She is proven wrong when both of them bite her in the neck, and she collapses dead. Jeremy reveals his true intentions to Astrid, and that he tricked her into agreeing to give up her life for his. He leaves her to get put on the soul train while he goes to get his pass stamped, but Astrid is spotted by Richard, who runs after her. Lydia catches up to Astrid and stops her from getting on the train, but when they pass through an emergency exit, they end up on one of Saturn's moons, aka the home of the sandworm. The monster emerges and chases after Lydia and Astrid, but they are pulled to safety by Richard. Dolores continues her afterlife killing spree after sucking out another ghost's soul. She reaches Beetlejuice's department and finds nothing and nobody. Jackson is interrogating Bob since he was dressed like Beetlejuice, but when Jackson leaves the room, Dolores finds Bob and sucks out his soul too. Lydia and Astrid reunite with Richard and bond briefly before they go to stop Jeremy from getting his pass stamped. They reach the window, where it looks like they are too late, and he smugly rubs it in their faces. Turns out the ghost that stamped the pass was Beetlejuice, and the stamp reads shit out of luck. Beetlejuice pulls a lever to a trapdoor that sends Jeremy down to hell. Delia ends up in the afterlife's waiting room, unable to grasp that she is no longer living. She resorts to calling upon Beetlejuice to help her get back, which he is more than happy to assist with. After saying goodbye to Richard, Lydia and Astrid return to the living world, where Astrid apologizes to Lydia for how she treated her. They then remember the wedding is happening at that moment, and Lydia decides to follow through with it. When they get to the chapel, Beetlejuice arrives with Delia to stop the ceremony. He injects Rory with a truth serum, forcing him to reveal that he always thought Lydia's paranormal abilities were bullshit and that he was only marrying her for her money. Beetlejuice provides Lydia with a glove to punch Rory across the room. Beetlejuice then proceeds to try and get his and Lydia's wedding to go through after trapping the other wedding guests inside their phones and warping their faces. Beetlejuice puts on an over-the-top musical number, even getting Jackson and his ghost cops to freeze in place. Dolores then shows up to cut things short. Astrid grabs the handbook and tries to find a loophole, as well as a way to get help. She draws a door on the floor to Saturn's moon, bringing the sandworm back out. Beetlejuice avoids getting eaten again by guiding the sandworm into the path of Rory and Dolores, allowing them to become its meal. Before Beetlejuice can finish the wedding, Astrid finds a loophole that says the contract Beetlejuice forced Lydia to sign for the marriage is null and void since he brought Lydia into the afterlife despite her still being alive. Lydia says his name 3 times and causes him to blow up like a balloon and pop. Jackson unfreezes and tells the ladies that he has to bring Delia back with him to the afterlife. Delia bids Lydia and Astrid farewell but promises to haunt them until she is ready to cross over, and they reaffirm their love for Delia. In the afterlife, Delia is reunited with Charles, or the rest of his body that didn't get eaten. Later on, Lydia films one last episode of Ghost House to retire and spend more time with Astrid. The two book a flight to Transylvania, where Astrid appears to be attracted to a boy dressed like Dracula. The scene cuts to them getting married and Astrid later giving birth, only for her to give birth to a hideous Beetlejuice baby that kills the doctors. Lydia wakes up, since this was a nightmare, but she hears and sees Beetlejuice next to her. She wakes up from this nightmare as well, indicating she is not quite rid of him just yet. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe for more.